The first one is the unknown God. So this is a mosaic of Paul that comes from the cathedral in Ravenna, which means it made it through the iconoclasm, and it's actually about the oldest portrait we have of Paul. So, and this is his story. Now, when they had traveled through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of the Jews. And according to Paul's custom, he went to them, and for 3 Sabbaths, he reasoned with them from the Scriptures. That was his modus operandi. And what happened? Well, there was a riot, and so the brethren immediately sent Paul and Silas away into Berea. And when they had arrived, they went into the synagogue of the Jews. These were more noble-minded than those in Thessalonica, for they received the word with great eagerness, examining the Scriptures daily to see if what he was saying was so. But the Jews of Thessalonica found out that the word of God had been proclaimed by Paul in Berea also. They came there also, agitating and stirring up the crowds, another riot. They immediately sent the brethren sent Paul out to go as far as the sea. Okay, so this is sort of the wash, rinse, repeat of Paul in the book of Acts. Did you notice this? This pattern repeats again and again. He arrives at a new city, speaks at a synagogue, causes a riot, flees to the next city.
That problem with the rat?
And it repeats.
Yeah.
Isn't had you noticed that pattern before? Anyway, so finally, here he is. He's in Athens. Now, Paul was waiting for them at Athens. His spirit was being provoked within him as he was observing the city full of idols. Now, it's like nice little Bible language, isn't it? He was really ticked off. Something like that, right? It enraged him, something like that. The city was full of idols. So anyway, what happened? Also, some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers were conversing with him. Some were saying, "What would this idle babbler wish to say?" Others, "He seems to be a proclaimer of strange deities," because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. They took him and brought him to the Areopagus, otherwise known as Mars Hill, saying, "May we know what this new teaching is, which you are proclaiming? For you are bringing some strange things to our ears, and we want to know what these things mean." Now, all the Athenians and the strangers visiting there used to spend their time in nothing other than telling or hearing something new. So which modern city is Athens like?
New York.
Is it like Washington, D.C.?
I was thinking New York, but it might
Not really, because it's not a big political power, right? And is it like Wall Street in New York? No, it was not a real financial power. So maybe it was a little bit more like Hollywood, right? Because there they were. They wanted to hear all the cool, new, exciting things. It was a center of culture, right? Now, all the Athenians and the strangers spend their time in nothing other than telling or hearing something new. Hollywood. So anyway, what happened? They took him and they brought him to the Areopagus, Mars Hill. And that is something somewhere between like the Oxford Union, which is like the Super Bowl of debating, right? And it's somewhere between that and the Joe Rogan Experience, right? It's Paul shot at the big time. He gets to talk and debate with all the top people of the ancient world in Athens, the home of philosophy, right? So he gets up. Paul stood in the midst of their Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I'm really ticked at all you guys because you're a bunch of idol worshippers." Oh, he didn't say that, did he? He said, "Men of Athens, I observe that you are very religious in all respects. For while I was passing through and examining the objects of your worship, I also found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' Therefore, what you worship in ignorance already, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and all things in it, since he's Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands." And he goes on from there, right? So you've heard that probably a million times, right? he said, I found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. It was already there in Athens. Now raise your hand if you know the backstory on the altar for the unknown God. Okay, here we go. So here's this guy. I'm going as fast as I can, as you can see. There's this guy, Diogenes Laertius, and he's like 3rd century BC, and he was the biographer of all the Greek philosophers. And they don't know much about him, but they do have his surviving works. And one of the philosophers that he covered was Epimenides of Knossos, or Epimenides of Crete, a semi-mythical guy from like 600 BC, a Greek seer, philosopher, poet from Knossos or Phaistos. So now we're getting down to it, the backstory on the altar. According to Diogenes Laertius, Epimenides was summoned to Athens to purify the city from a miasma, which is probably like a plague, caused by this situation where a bunch of people were killed while seeking sanctuary in altars, and that led to a curse on the city. The gods got angry, and it manifested as a plague or some misfortune. So here's what he did. Epimenides, known for his prophetic and purificatory skills, have you said that word before? Instructed the Athenians to release black and white sheep from the Areopagus, the place where Paul is speaking. The sheep were allowed to wander freely, and the priests followed them. Wherever a sheep laid down, it was sacrificed on the spot, and an altar was erected to an unnamed or appropriate god, as the resting place was seen as divinely chosen. There it is. An altar was erected to the unnamed, that is, the unknown God. Isn't that interesting? I think ancient history is interesting, but is it relevant to us? Well, here's what C.S. Lewis had to say. I always picture C.S. Lewis as being the #1 Protestant saint of the 20th century. Maybe Billy Graham. I think we can still believe in the pre-Christian ages God was preparing the world for his coming. In the myths and rituals of paganism, distorted and confused though they were, there was some element of divine prompting, a kind of rehearsal for the great drama of the incarnation.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So there you go. God had put this story of the unknown God into the Greek culture just so that Paul could have an opening, a way of touching base and having something in common for introducing the gospel. Now, I talked to the Orthodox Christian Missionary OCMC guys about this.
That's where you were going.
And they said, yeah, there's this book called The Peace Child,
Yep.
which is written by a Protestant missionary to New Guinea. And the guy describes his experience, how he saw this tribe, the Sawi tribe. They were constantly warring, killing each other. And when they'd make a peace, the way they do it is they would exchange a child to ensure peace between warring groups. And he called this a redemptive, this missionary, Don Richardson, called that a redemptive analogy.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was presenting, and he used it to introduce the gospel as saying, Jesus is the peace child because God sent him to you to reconcile humanity to himself. It served as a bridge to communicate the gospel. Now, this little summary here doesn't really go into the actual sort of standard of this Sawi tribe, but one of their chiefest virtues and one of the greatest things you could do as an accomplishment, admired thing, was treachery. If you could be treacherous and somehow lead somebody to a horrible fate, man, you were like El Primo. Okay? And when they were warring, they'd have headhunting and cannibalism. So there really wasn't that much built into their culture for them to relate to the gospel, but this was actually put there. So, the idea is that in all or most cultures, God has put something that gives a astute person who gets to know the culture a way of introducing the gospel in a way that they go, yeah, I'm sort of with you already, right? So, that's really number one. And as I was thinking about it in our culture, we've got these different generations, right? And if you're Gen X, the biggest thing in your culture is Star Wars. And you could maybe use the Force. And Wayne is right, we're probably only going to get to 2 of them. And if you're a millennial, Harry Potter is the bomb thing that everybody knows about. And I couldn't really figure out what it was for Gen Z. But, I mean, that's the basic idea. And we could stop and have a little discussion here. Let's go ahead and do that.